Pete Yost here for the UnBuildIt podcast with a word about our sponsor, Huber Engineered Woods. There are really three reasons why I think Huber Engineered Woods stands out, and it's a big part of why they're a sponsor of our UnBuildIt podcast. First, they develop systems of products. The products are compatible and integrated. Makes our jobs a lot more easy in the field and when specifying. Second is superior tech support. There are really good website resources that they have developed for the application of their products, but they also have an outstanding 800 numbered tech team that really knows their stuff. And the last is a really active technical research and development team with whom I've done a lot of work over the years, and I have a lot of faith in the information I get from them when I have questions about product performance. So that's it. That's our high performance sponsor. Now on to the podcast.
Welcome to the UnBuildIt podcast. I'm Jake Bruton. Today I'm joined by my other two normal co-hosts, Steve Basic and Peter Yost. Say hello.
There. Yeah, hello.
Jake is our perfect host.
And today we're going to talk about floor framing, but I want to start the floor framing conversation talking about World War I.
Ooh. You're going to lay a good floor for this conversation?
More specifically, we're going to talk about French General Ferdinand Foch, F-O-C-H. So this is the beginning of us diving a little deeper into framing. We're going to talk floors and walls and roofs. But this quote has been stuck in my head for like 6 months since I read an article about this French general. A little background, he was like the general in charge of the French infantry. And at the Treaty of Versailles, he was the one that negotiated terms or was in charge of negotiating terms. And he's also the one that like is most famous for saying these terms aren't strict enough. Obviously, this was in French and I'm paraphrasing. These terms aren't strict enough. This is not a peace treaty. This is a 20-year armistice. And like World War II broke out almost 20 years to the day of them signing the Treaty of Versailles. So like he turned out to be right, whether or not, justifiably he was right or not. He basically said, this is not strict enough. We're not going to get, peace out of this.
Don't worry. We're going to get to floor framing. We are.
But the quote that I walked away from the article was him talking about the war. And it was his second most famous quote. And it was, what is this all about? And I thought that was like a perfect thing for when we start framing a house and we start at the floor elevation. There are so many decisions that have to be made that have nothing to do with the actual floor. But
so you're reading this book about a French general from the early turn of the century and floor framing comes
and thinking about floor framing.
And you say, I need help.
It's a big, wide world.
The quote was, what is this all about? And it makes sense to me to go, okay, but our layout has to be this because we have to do this. And our walls are going to end up being like this so that we have to make a change from this. And like, there's all these decisions. There's all this. We have to know what we're doing. We have to know what it's about at that moment. That kind of guides the way that we look at it. And you're perplexed for some reason.
No, I'm just
thinking.
Trying to politely play along.
Trying to put up with the fact that I bought
Steve politely playing along. That's good. That's a good goal.
Autobiography. Politely playing along.
I would title it that.
So
it's pretty true.
We start with that decision-making process. One of the big ones is as simple as spacing. What are our framing members going to be? What is our layout going to be? What material are we going to build it out of?
Right. And if it's what it's all about, do we always frame floors? I mean, do we do concrete decks, metal decks? Why don't we do those?
Are we going to claim the same reason that not very many people have adopted SIPs or ICF is because it's not the way that we've done it in the past?
Yeah. I mean, it gets back to why we think so often about framing everything because we're carpenters, right? We like to do things out of wood.
And the kind of wood that I can carry around with me or with me and one other person.
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of this goes back, I think, to if it's type 5 construction, you're allowed to build stuff out of stuff that burns, right? How am I doing for laying the base for talking about floor framing? Have you ever built a house where the floors weren't framed with wood?
Yes.
Well, how about concrete slab?
Well, I mean, yeah, slab on grade, but you've built floors above one
SIPS
story.
floor?
Yes.
And
And what were they? What was it?
Concrete.
Suspended concrete.
Well, yeah, we didn't fill a basement. So it would have to be suspended, right?
And so what drove the suspended concrete decision
I know, I'm being
making?
funny. Well, you guys have me, like you guys were rattling on. I had a whole train of thought. I was going to come in and drop the H-bomb. And then you switched to concrete floors. So
Sorry.
It totally took me off the whole wood frame floor thing. So I'm trying to mentally regroup.
We're on the decision-making conversation.
Yeah, I know. I was on it too. But you just move to concrete, which is not part of, well, it is part of the decision-making process, but that's way after these other decisions that I'm forced to make.
Such as?
So when you say what's this all about, right? When you drive through, I'll use post-war New England neighborhoods because that's what I'm the most familiar with, right? There's a reason why houses are 24, 26 feet wide because they put a bearing wall down the middle, they frame them with 2x8s, and they hit their limit at 24, 26 feet.
Yeah.
It wasn't that they fit on the lot better or whatever. It was they were governed. And it just so happens that 24 feet with a 2x4 wall yielded like a 11-foot bedroom on the wall, right? 11 and change. So you get 2 bedrooms on the split on that. You get to frame it with 2x8s. Second floor, we have houses in New England, our second floors are 2x6.
Yeah.
With
bit of a
because they're a cape, so you lose. You drop about 40% of the second floor. But that 2x8. So when you say what's this all about, as an architect, when you sit down, you look at it and say, okay, well, I'm going to have a house here, and initially it's a question of like how big is the house, right? Because if it's 2,500 versus say 5,000 square foot, then the house might grow from 28 feet wide to 30 or 32 feet wide. And so the 28 foot wide, if you put a beam down the middle, then you can sit there and say, okay, I'm down at 14 feet. I can probably do it with 2x10s. I can do it with a 9.5 inch I joist. I can do it with a trim joist that has the trimmable open web, or I can just move to a regular truss system. So my decisions abound there. The questions also are, what's the vertical? Do I have any vertical restrictions as to am I okay with the deck being, or first floor being 25 inches above grade? Because that's about where it's going to fall with a 10 inch or 12 inch floor frame. You're going to fall in there. So these kind of questions about the design and aesthetics are driving some of those framing decisions, right? Because I'm trying to figure out where the floor relative to grade. Am I going to have patios outside? Are they going to be brick, or are we going to do decks? Are we going to do a deck that goes down to a patio? All these things come to mind. And then from there, then I get into, okay, well, what floor system is the best for this house? And, if I use an I joist, then I don't have the flexibility I have with trusses. Is the basement going to be finished, right? Because if the basement is finished, I joists become an easier answer because I'm going to put drywall on the ceiling, so I don't have to worry about the fire code issue related to leaving engineered wood joists open. So the question is, do I move towards a solid stick 2x10 or 2x12, or do I go to the I joist? The other questions are, I've had clients I had one client, she was super strict, absolutely no adhesives, glue, or anything in the house. So we had to do it with solid stick. The floor sheathing was board sheathing and everything. It's like, I sent that out to the structural engineer and he emails back like, are you serious? You really want to do this? He goes, you know how expensive that's going to be? And I said, yeah, we want to do it. And she knows it's going to be twice the price for the frame. All right. We sent it to the framer. Guess what he said? Do you know how expensive this is going to be? It's probably going to be twice the price.
Yeah.
Yes, we know. But so there's a whole bunch of client requirements that come into play with it. And then the decisions of is the downstairs finished? is it an 8-foot basement or is it a 10-foot basement? Because if it's a 10-foot basement, then I'm more
putting beams and soffits underneath
and stuff underneath, and I can, if I drop a 10-inch duct down and have to build the soffit, that's different than building down a 7'6" ceiling.
So I was wondering when you were going to get to not just the implications of structural choices, but other things that have to be accommodated as you mean along the way.
What is it all about?
Well, and then all of that ties into what is the budget for this project, right? Because someone that's going to put say a $80,000 home theater in the basement, then they're not going to care about the upcharge of $2,000 to move to floor trusses from an engineered floor joist to ensure all the heating ducts and plumbing get run down that.
So when in design do you pick your floor framing systems?
I think early on I have a sense of what it's going to be.
So do you have a preference that all other things equal, this is the floor framing system I like to use?
I mean, trusses definitely offer the most flexibility, but trusses offer the least flexibility to get them right. Right? Because solid sawn 2x10s we're cutting on site. Engineered floor joists we're cutting on site.
We can go grab another one if we need another one.
Yeah, the trusses get manufactured. And if they come and they're a 1/4 inch short, then we have to deal with how do we deal with a 1/4 inch short.
Right.
But there's companies now out there like Triforce Open Joist where they're a open web truss that has a 4-foot engineered eye joist at the end that you can trim up to 2 feet. So you can buy those in 2-foot increments, and you get the benefit of the open truss with the trimmability of if your foundation is out. And, you would like to think that everything's perfect,
it will be.
But the foundation guy, if he's out a little, then the framer's going to have to exaggerate it and square it up. And, what you thought was 24 feet is now 24 7/8 or something.
Right.
And 24 on the other end.
And 24, yeah. Well, we hope not.
But that happens.
But all these decisions begin to play roles in that, the floor framing issue and the span, right? There's understanding what we're going to put in the basement. So when I start out design, I give people homework and they lay out like, okay, we want a media room in the basement. Well, if I know I'm putting a media room in the basement and say the house is 28 feet deep, there's a really good chance that I'm not going to run a beam down the center of the house, right? I might push it so that it's 18 feet and 10 feet. And I use the 10-foot as a utility corridor, or what I call the dirty basement down the side, and the 18 feet is the clean basement. So there's no ductwork, there's no plumbing, none of that stuff underneath the floor joist. It's all on the dirty basement side.
Right.
So that allows me to use the eye joist and stuff again as part of that decision-making process. So I'll let you guys speak. I know I'm taking over here, but there's definitely this matrix of client wishes, client budget mixed with what we have available to how flexible do we want to be with that floor system.
So I remember the very first project when I worked together was that Cleveland housing project in Ohio, and taking a look at the floor plans and looking at your framing, which ran exactly the opposite of the way I would think it would go, because I was looking at it from strictly structural. And I asked you, I said, why are you doing the framing perpendicular to the way that it seems logical for structure? And you said, I'm not trying to accommodate the structure there. I'm trying to accommodate the HVAC system and the location of the plant. Yeah. And that was like a huge thing.
And I remember those plans. It came, the duct came up one side, it ran underneath the 9-foot ceiling. So we had one soffit literally down the middle of the house over the kitchen bar. But that allowed us to come off the top of that duct into the joist space and go all the way to the back of the townhouse and all the way to the front of the townhouse.
But it was huge for me because I had never once in my life thought about accommodating framing according to mechanical needs.
Well, it's mechanical, but also think about it from an air barrier perspective. If I have a 40 or 50 foot long condo, I can choose to run the framing the short way and end up with, 40 foot, that's 10, 30, that's 30 penetrations of floor joists through the air barrier.
Right.
If I put 1 or 2 beam lines in there, I have 2 or 3 penetrations, and all my floor joists run parallel to that wall. So I can put the drywall up there, run it up, get it nice and airtight, and acoustically more efficient because I don't have these breaks in that wall between units. So there's a lot of things that we could sit here and talk for hours about because the matrix is so intertwined.
So when I started thinking about this, the first thing I thought of was HVAC, and I thought of my personal house where we ran not HVAC but mechanicals, plumbing, from one end of the house to the other to the first available down wall that's not an exterior wall. The next thing I thought of is one that I feel like every time I have a conversation about floor framing with contractors trying to do advanced framing 24 on center that they don't know. Are you familiar with the L over 360 requirements for tile? So ceramic and porcelain is an L over 360.
Yep.
If you don't know what L over 360 is, it's the span of the joist divided by 360 is the allowable deflection before it's too much deflection for that tile. Mm-hmm. It's L over 720 for natural stone. And this is the one that nobody seems to know. And I printed the chart. Huber does not allow you to use their 3/4 subfloor 24 on center to meet an L over 360.
Oh,
so anybody out there that's framing advanced framing and still using the 23/32 subfloor, you need to be at the 7/8 if you want to make that L over 360, and you got to be at the 1/8 to make the
L over 720.
L over 720.
But even that, there's a kind of.
So you have to know what you have to know what the floor
finish
Well, there is, but there's a micro matrix to that too. Because if I put 3/4 inch over 2x12s on 24 inch on center, or I put 3/4 inch over an all joist 25 series, which has a 3.5 inch flange, that flange reduces the span by 3 inches.
It does, but it doesn't get it to that 19 and 3/16 that actually qualifies.
I understand that. But it's not only about the span. It's about if I put a good bead of adhesive there, I get better composite action on the negative moment over the floor joist. So all the structures.
Those were a lot of fancy words. You're saying the more gluey, the more it becomes one thing.
The more surface area I build. So think about parking garages. Those are T-beams. Mm-hmm. Right? The reason they work is because there's this thing called composite action. The beam and that top plate is a flange to the beam. So it's a T-shaped beam. It's not a beam carrying a slab. It's a T-beam. So the minute I glue the I-joist to the subfloor, I've created a connection there, and I get composite action, which increases. So that's why you get increased floor performance when you glue and screw or ring shank nail, because the closer I make the subfloor to the floor joist the better composite action I get.
But there are simple solutions to things like that specific problem. You frame that one section 16 on center.
Yeah, I mean,
it's fine.
To go to a 24 inch on center floor frame, it's one of those things that it's probably one of the bigger battles and bigger nightmares that it's worth just unfortunately saying, keep the floor at 16 inches on center.
So that's interesting because most advanced framing would say 24 on center as the spacing for all members of the framing package, and you're saying, hey, there's better battles than for the floor.
It would if I was doing a post-war New England house that was 24 by 42 cape.
Yeah,
I would have no problem going to 24 because you're probably going to go from a 2x8 to a 2x10 floor joist.
Right.
You bump the floor sheathing from 3/4 to 7/8 or 1 1/8, and you run with it, and you're good. But if you're doing a 3,000 square foot custom home that the exterior wall is coastlining and a bunch of things are happening there, then it becomes a real nightmare. Walls are far easier to do, and roof trusses at 24 inches on center than floors, because those have more consistent sheathing types, right? I mean, I'm going to put plywood or OSB for 99% of the houses we do on the outside of the stud wall. So the stud wall doesn't know the difference as much.
Yeah.
But like Jake said, you get some of these houses, people want to put like 30-inch square tile in their kitchen now. It's like, man, you got to have...
Can't deflect at all.
I mean, one of the typical details that Lexi and I do is under every kitchen island for 4 feet to one side to the other side, we double the floor joist underneath it. And it's not because of the weight. It's more of a comfort knowing I'm buying a better house, because people have said, why do we have all these double joists? They said, well, when you're having a dinner party and you have 10 people around the island and someone's walking across the room, you don't want everybody's wine glass shaking. So I want to stiffen the floor, because we don't want to give a sense that your house is a piece of crap, that we've designed something good. And the island is a heavily trafficked area that it doesn't necessarily just have the static load of a big island and countertop. It has the dynamic load of people walking by, and it has the visual experience of it's one of the places where people are going to be sitting, and you would notice a wine glass shaking when
like our mics and our tables shaking. When
It's so funny you say this, because in our 100-year-old New England home, it's 2x8s, full span 12 feet, just right on the margin. And we came in and did a kitchen remodel that involved a 14-foot long granite countertop. I had to go downstairs and beef up. I had to put in a partition wall to support the load from that.
When we've remodeled houses and you're going from like no island, and we're in there now doing a 12-foot by 3.5-foot island, and there's 2x8 joists. It's like, no, we got to put a beam, or we got to go down there and insist.
It's like a hammock.
Yeah, and the homeowner's like, look at you like, why do we have to do that? And I'm like, well, because you don't want the place shaking or the tile cracking. Or
So I laid out 3 things in front of us here. These 3 things are printed and in every job file whenever we have a file folder at the jobs. From the beginning of the project, and they deal specifically with floor framing. And I wanted to say that, first of all, I like pictures. So 2 of the 3 are pictures. The first one is R502.2. The second one's 502.8. The first one is like...
So from the code book.
It's amazing.
Those are out of the code book?
Yeah.
Huh, that's what it looks like.
And I'm like, it's amazing how much information can be on one picture, and how much you can really infer from what they've included and what not included. So I would recommend looking at these for sure. The second one, the 502.8, is the notching and drilling guide, which is a fantastic one. And then the third one, if you don't buy your materials at Mid-City Lumber in Columbia, Missouri, you probably don't know about it. Our lumberyard has taken the span charts out of the code book for species, dimension, and everything for dimensional lumber, and given you what's allowable for what spaces and what the spans are. So they've simplified about 6 or 7 charts and put them on one laminated sheet, that like this thing does wonders when we're remodeling and we don't know what we can and can't do.
So 2 pictures in one table. No text.
2 pictures and as few words as possible.
My structural engineering professor said, take the depth in inches, multiply it by 3, and answer the question in feet.
So the depth in inches.
The depth in inches multiplied by 3, it will give you the span rating in feet.
Are we going to real-time check that?
He said that should get you very close. So a 2x10 is 15 feet.
Yep.
He said when you start exceeding 15 feet, then you need to start questioning. It's pretty safe up to about 15.
So if you were Doug Fir and select 16 on center, 2x10, 17.4.
Yeah, that's Doug Fir. If you went down to spruce pine fir, it's probably closer to the
16 feet even.
So 15 feet is, so now double check the 2x12. It should be 18 feet.
It's 19.6.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So say the calculation one more time.
So it is the depth in inches times 3 answered in feet is the kind of cautionary note of span.
Okay. I like it.
So I have to tell one more quick Steve Basic story, which is when you were working for the Building America program at Building Science Corporation, and Joe and Betsy sent you out to the West Coast to do training for architects in advanced framing, and particularly floor systems to accommodate HVAC. Tell the real quick story of what happened when you did that.
Is this the?
I think it was Kaufman and Broad, but for production buildings.
No, this was that was in Sacramento with Rich Coyle.
Oh, was it? I didn't.
It was the discussion with the architect about toilets, kitchen sinks, and that.
No, it was when they sent you out to train these architects for a production builder about how to do advanced framing from a building science perspective, and particularly to accommodate HVAC, you were supposed to do a 2-day training, and you called Joe and Betsy the first night and said, I'm catching a plane home. And Joe and Betsy, what do you mean you're in the middle of your training? He goes, they're not coming back. They told me that it's not their job to figure out floor framing.
Yeah.
They're architects.
Yeah, it's just it's baffling. I mean, architects don't.
Let's be fair though.
One of these days we'll get up enough gumption where we can sit here and I'll just have a podcast, architect bashing podcast.
No offense to architects. Half, if not more, of every architect that I've ever worked with, no offense, shouldn't be calling stuff out anyway because they're not going to pay attention. So I'd rather them just not put it on the plans and let me figure it out anyway.
That's the other approach is it is not your responsibility as an architect.
Well,
I don't want you to do
There's
it.
a lot of things that play a role in the integration of, I mean, designing a house is not, some architects choose to design half the house. Mm-hmm. And they design it from an application standpoint, not an integrating standpoint.
Yeah.
Buildability.
Say that again. They design it from
an application standpoint. So
not for integration.
Right. I want it to look this way.
Yeah.
I want to have these kinds of windows out front, nice and big with stone on the corners here and this and that.
Yeah.
Now you go figure out and apply my concept to the building assemblies.
But to be fair, and I start every training I do with architects about this saying, I'm not an architect, and I'm not an architect because as a building science consultant, I get to focus on one lens to look at a building. To be fair to architects, you have so many lenses through which you have to
Well, that's what I'm saying.
evaluate.
The matrix, when you talk about floor framing, it's not just about, hey, we're going to do 2x10s or I-joists.
It's hard. It's hard to be an architect.
What is down? So again, it's, the more I do this, the more cranky I get about what it is.
I didn't know that was possible.
No, it is. I still have a lot left on my crank meter. There you go. But it is definitely all about what questions should we be asking. And that's everybody. So when you say
the entire design
that's
process?
When you say, what is this all about? It's about what are the questions, because you can't effectively, in my eyes, you can't effectively design the right floor frame system unless you know what are the rooms below, what are the rooms above, what are the potential finishes for that floor, what is the budget?
And we started this conversation with, have you ever built a floor not out of wood framing? And the thing I like about this is that every time I ask you a question about adding a design constraint, you just say, tell me up front what you need, and that I will design around that.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure the question about not using wooden floor framing was, there was some design constraint for that building that said, I've got to think outside the box. I've got to do something on that.
We have a house under construction right now. It's got a steel beam. The first floor is a steel beam metal composite pan with a concrete slab in it. Because the homeowners wanted concrete on the first floor, but they didn't want to forfeit the basement.
Aesthetics.
The aesthetics, the house is a very contemporary looking house. This is the one that had the crushable stuff under the beam that it got a bunch of comments on Instagram. It's something
the thermal
bond or aroma bond, or it's something aroma bond. I forget. Anyways, but that was their goal. They wanted a steel beam, or they wanted a slab system. So when we worked out with the structural engineer, he thought a couple steel beams, the corrugated
it's a metal pan floor.
You can get about 8 or 9 feet out of those. So we have a primary beam system, a couple secondary beams, and then we have that metal pan system.
What, Jake? Just I know we're about to wrap up. Do you have a go-to favorite floor framing system, or is it like whatever fits the best bill?
It is whatever fits the best bill, and I live completely in two camps. I still, from a carpentry standpoint, really enjoy working with dimensional lumber.
Yeah.
And I really like floor trusses.
Well, I'm going to throw this one out at you too, because this is just another level of matrix that I don't control. What does the lumberyard carry?
Yeah.
Right? Because I can sit here and say, let's use Boise Cascade BCI joists or Roseburg this.
Right.
No, the lumberyard up by us, they use all joist.
Yeah.
Yep.
So regardless of what I send in,
Good point.
the lumberyard is going to come back and they're going to say, hey, we substituted all joist, and we had our engineer just do a 1-for-1 substitution using all joist. So now what that has prompted me, because I do work all over the country, is when I'm sitting there, I usually have a conversation with the builders and we talk through. And then one of my questions is what does your lumberyard carry for floor joists and for this and for that, so that I know, because rather than have them spec something and then we have to do an or equal, let's just start out speccing what you're going to buy. So let's find out what you can buy.
Yeah.
And then we'll go from there.
So Jake, we have a new final wrap up, which is Pete's favorite.
I still have one more.
Oh, sorry. I know. I went too soon.
But I got to tell you about this, because this is pretty exciting, and you'll understand why the minute I say it. So I'm doing an ICF house. Woohoo! Actually, I'm doing like 3 of them right now.
Wow. Don't tell people that.
Yeah. But anyways, one of them is not only ICF, but it's a full concrete. They have it's something deck or something.
Oh, yes. Okay.
So it's a preformed like EPS T-beam that gets filled with concrete.
Yeah.
That works in coordination with ICFs.
Interesting.
Pass.
And here is the kicker. The house is probably close to a little over 8,000 square feet.
Holy smokes.
And we have a barn that's probably another 3,000 square feet.
Out of ICF?
It's all ICF, and all of this, it's something.
Does the person own an ICF company?
No, they do not.
Okay.
But he is totally sold on it. And then, of course, now, so we have this concrete floor. And now he's talking about, well, how do we get, I want to do a warm board floor. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, so let's take this.
Warm board?
Yeah, let's take this plywood based floor system
and put it
over concrete.
Yeah.
So now we're figuring that out. But they do have a solution. But anyways.
So I was going to say, you've provided Pete's information resource with the 2 sections of the code. So tell us again real quickly what those 2 sections of the code are.
Okay, so you glazed over that just a tiny bit. Our new feature at the end of every podcast is going to be Pete's resource. So Pete has favorite resources for everything. We tried to talk him out of this, and he's insistent that this is what we have to do. And so this week's Pete's resource is, let's call it chapter 5 in the code book, floor framing, but R502.2 and R502.8. And those are the 2021. I don't know if it's moved a little bit from year to year, but I'm going out of 2021 because that's what we have in the office.
Close enough.
Hey, I have a self-serving PSA too.
Okay.
So on the podcast, UnBuildIt podcast, you can find, I just started a series called Before the Build. And what it is it's a 24 plus video series where we talk everything just like we had this conversation. I'm going to have a video where I'm going to talk about the floor frame.
With Big Red.
Or with Big Red and the foundation system. But we're going to go through a bunch of these decisions on why did we choose this floor system? Why did we choose this wall
And you've already got like 3, 4, 5, 6 up?
I have 3 up.
They're really good. They're really good.
We have some more that are, coming up weekly. So go check those out.
So it's important to note as we say goodbye here that when Steve says they're on the podcast, they're not the audio version. You're going to have to subscribe to the YouTube channel. They are video only. There are some other videos up that are video only. We have some wing nut testing from Peter. We have a whole bunch of other stuff that goes up every Tuesday. There's another video besides the Thursday content that we put out. So make sure you subscribe. There's a little bell so you get a notification every time that we post something. And certainly like and comment and go to iTunes and leave us a 5-star review. That's how other people find us, other than you telling your friends. So,
and Jake and I are contributors to the Build Show Network. We have the whole Build Show Build, where Jake and I did 12 episodes of the building of the Hilltop Aero project. So go check those out. Those are really great videos. And again, we talk about all this stuff through construction. My before the build is overhead looking at drawings and decisions made before the build, but the Build Show build is during construction. Well done, and something to check out too.
Gentlemen, thank you for joining me today.
Awesome.
Have a good day.